To our beloved friends and students gathered here at St. Vladimir Seminary this evening, and to the many who are with us online, I say good evening. What an immense joy it is to gather here and celebrate beauty, to hear from one of our great living artists, and to reflect together on themes that matter deeply to us. This is a gift, a privilege, and my main feeling, and I think I speak for all of us, is one of profound gratitude. I'm Peter Butenev. I've taught here at the seminary for over 20 years, and I'm founding director of the Institute of Sacred Arts. And it's my honor to welcome you to this lecture and to this conversation on behalf of our president, Father Chad Hatfield, and our dean, Alex Tudorier. My words about Dr. George Kordis will be brief and to the point. I just now called him one of our great living artists, and I think this expresses much of what is to be said about him. He's an artist in and for the church, as well as in and for the world. And this already teaches us much about the porous boundaries between the churchly and the secular. George's ecclesiastical painting adorns the interiors of churches, some of them massive, in North America, in Australia, in Europe, including Greece and Mount Athos. He also paints and draws in multiple media, really on whatever comes to hand: wood, paper, papyrus, stones, as well as on digital media, his beloved iPad. Professor Kordis is also one of the rare iconographers and artists who is also a trained theologian, and therefore iconologist. And he was longtime professor of iconology at the University of Athens, which also means that his ideas come to us both visually and verbally, in his art, in his spoken and written word. And no matter how he is expressing himself, we all end up learning a very great deal, and perhaps rethinking some of our ideas about words like tradition, creativity, innovation, and again, rethinking the boundaries between ecclesiastical and secular culture. George Kordis is our inaugural artist in residence here at the Institute of Sacred Arts, and having him here in this capacity is, of course, a very great honor and a joy for us. It's an enrichment for us. And among other things, he has made a lot of art while here. He also was at the center of a fruitful academic roundtable organized by my colleague Rosita Schroeder. He's interacted with students and with faculty. He has led an icon workshop for people both inside and outside our seminary community. But Dr. Kordis's residency with us is also a sign to the community of artists, scholars, people both in and outside the church, a sign that our Institute of Sacred Arts is committed to engaging with people of the very highest caliber, and together with them engaging the world with the beauty of sacred art and with serious theological reflection on it. I'd like to mention that as of this coming fall semester, St. Vladimir Seminary is now offering a 2-year residential Master of Arts degree with a concentration in sacred arts. This is an opportunity for specialists in any area of the arts to enrich their work, to broaden it in the context of other sacred arts, to deepen it within the liturgical context of the arts, and to understand the theological and historical context of the arts, forming a cohort with other creative people within the larger seminary community. If there are any of you who are among our online participants who might be interested in such an opportunity, I invite you to reach out to us. We respond to emails promptly. I would be delighted to hear from you. Visit us at instituteofsacredarts.com, where you'll find information about our work, a lot of interesting videos and interviews, and you'll also find the podcast that I so enjoy hosting called Luminous Conversations on Sacred Arts. But we're here tonight to engage with a significant artist and with the faith and the ideas that nourish his work. Professor Kordis will be speaking with us this evening on the theme of tradition as creativity. He'll speak for about 30 or 35 minutes, followed by a short visual presentation, and deliberately leave some time for questions and conversation, discussion, reflections. So as you listen this evening, please feel free to be thinking of questions, both here in this auditorium and in the chat window online. And I'll do my best to moderate this discussion. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. George Kordis.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all for coming this evening to my presentation and giving me the opportunity to present some thoughts on this important theme, important issue, the dialogue between tradition and creativity. The title of my presentation is The Icon and Religious Art, Some Thoughts on the Possibility of Innovation in the Art of Iconography. In recent years, iconographers throughout the Orthodox world have abandoned Nazarene and naturalistic Western styles of painting and have returned to the Byzantine tradition of visual art, painting icons in that tradition. However, the benefits of this return to the Byzantine tradition notwithstanding, this paradigm shift involves certain risks and entails some serious issues of concern to the art of the Church, which is the living body of Christ. First, there is the danger that through the repetition of forms and styles of the past, the art of iconography may become static and devoid of the breath of life. This dangerous possibility is already visible on the horizon and in some cases has already become a popular trend, as in Greece, for example. Portable icons and even entire churches have been painted as faithful copies of older icons, from which any element of iconographer's personal style is altogether absent. For this reason, such works seem to lack a sense of freedom and are rendered lifeless, with technical excellence their sole virtue. At this point, this phenomenon has become a conscious trend, inspiring a response from several iconographers who have opted to pursue an entirely personal style of painting. This approach had led to the adoption of certain stylistic choices which have been called into question by many in the Church. In this way, two stylistic extremes have emerged which are at odds with one another and which are consequently unable to lead to a truly creative synthesis capable of reconciling tradition and renewal. With a view to exploring the possibility of such a synthesis, today I will briefly outline the ways in which icons differ from religious works of art. Specifically, I will attempt to identify what distinguishes an icon which is intended for veneration from a work of religious art. What is it that renders a painting appropriate for veneration inside or even outside the space of a church building? Does the answer lie in its painting style, the specific materials employed to produce it, or perhaps in something else entirely? A variety of points of view have been advanced on this matter. However, I feel that they are not grounded on a strong foundation, but rather represent the expression of personal opinions, which, regardless of their validity, cannot properly constitute the foundation for the study of the culture of the Church, which constitutes the way of being of a unified community of persons who share a specific understanding of the world and relationships generally. Oftentimes, scholars identify the main distinction between icons and religious art as a difference in artistic style. According to this view, if a painting is rendered in a naturalistic style, it is not an icon but an example of religious painting. In such a case, the anti-naturalistic ethos of the Byzantine style becomes the ultimate criterion for the existence of an icon and is considered that which makes a painting an icon. In fact, it is often maintained that even the materials with which an icon is made may affect whether a painting is actually an icon or not. Accordingly, an icon painted in oils is not deemed to be an authentic icon, as it does not preserve the traditional technique of tempera painting. From this perspective, an authentic icon is only one which has been painted on a carved wood panel with the sole use of natural pigments as opposed to synthetic ones. Clearly, a theology of the nature of artist's materials and stylistic elements has developed, which would have an icon depend for its existence on secondary peripheral elements. This approach provides an easy solution as to how two icons may be differentiated from religious painting. I fear, however, that there are serious consequences to such an approach, which lead to the absolutization of the Byzantine style as the only style appropriate to icon painting. From this perspective, the Byzantine style of painting is perceived as a kind of sacred artistic language which can neither change nor be subject to innovation or development. Another issue that arises as a result of this viewpoint is that such a static understanding of the artistic style of icon painting fails to account for the significant changes and developments in artistic style evident throughout the history of church history, of the ecclesiastical art history. Also, there is no extant historical events evident of reactions to those changes on the part of the faithful, nor certainly has any official reaction from the Church been recorded since no ecumenical or pan-Orthodox synod has ever sought to prescribe a specific iconographic style or specified materials for painting icons. Even more striking is the fact that in the sources of the Byzantine and post-Byzantine periods, at least in the broader Greek world, but also generally, I think, in the Orthodox world, there have never been any instances of such an ontological interpretation of artistic style in iconography. A search for guidelines for the authenticity of icons on the basis of style in the writings of the Father of the Church would similarly be made in vain. In other words, there have been no official statements to the effect that a painting is an icon on the basis of its rejection of a naturalistic style of painting, or again, that a painting ceases to be an authentic icon because it has been made using allegedly unsuitable materials. In my view, such an interpretation of icons is exaggerated and lacking in support from the primary sources. This view should therefore be abandoned as it is unable to account for the existence of artistic developments over the course of the history of iconography. Instead, it is necessary to defer to Byzantine sources in order to define what an icon is, and then to proceed to identify the role and function of the element of painting itself in icons. I would argue that this constitutes the prerequisite for any discussion of the possibility of development or innovation in the art of iconography, and of course, for determining if a modern art of creative iconography is ever possible. How then are icons defined by the Church and by the theology of the Fathers of the Church? What is it that makes a painting an icon? According to the answer given by the Fathers during the course of the iconoclasm, in their efforts to respond to the heretical theology of the iconoclasm, is that the icon of Christ is, by definition, his hypostatic form, the form Christ assumed when he became man. The form of his hypostasis depicts him, shows him to us, but does not describe either of his natures, human or divine, since an icon can only depict the hypostasis, but not the nature essence of the person depicted, as St. Theodore the Studite explains. Through this theology, the Fathers demonstrated that Christ is depicted in the same way as any other human being, indicating that he is fully human and, being without sin, brought salvation to mankind. Therefore, since the external form of the hypostasis of Christ, that which the people who lived alongside him saw, a priori constitutes his icon, it is not a particular style of art at all that renders a painting an icon of Christ. Rather, it is a person's form or likeness that constitutes his or her icon, since that is the true hypostatic image of any depicted person. Consequently, an icon is not the product of art. According to St. Theodore Studite, Christ created his own icon through his incarnation, as he was born with a human face. This expression of theology is that which is officially accepted by the Church and has been incorporated into its holy, orthodox, and synodic texts. It is also of great importance for our understanding of visual art and can help us today in defining what constitutes an icon as opposed to a religious painting. The proceedings of the Seventh Ecumenical Council clearly define and state that the form and name of a person depicted in an icon are as the elements which together constitute an icon, and that these are an icon's essential elements. If these elements should undergo change, there can be no authentic icon. This is the very reason why icons are venerated. The veneration of an icon is directed towards the person depicted in the icon precisely because the likeness in the painted icon corresponds to the likeness of the person it depicts. An icon is suitable for veneration if it preserves the true likeness of the depicted saint. If, however, the painted icon should alter the saint's likeness, the resulting image is rendered unsuitable for veneration. Moreover, at no point in the proceedings of the Seventh Ecumenical Council it is stated that an icon can only be produced employing a specific style in order for it to be considered an authentic icon of Christ or the saints. These are the precise views put forth by St. Photius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who describes the role of the art of the icon as limited to a process whereby a person's likeness is depicted in such a way as to eliminate any unnecessary or extraneous elements while at the same time preserving the authentic likeness of the depicted person, and the creation of a style of painting appropriate to the presentation of the form or likeness of the depicted persons, which itself constitutes the essence of an icon. With these elements as our foundation, it can be concluded that the essence of an Orthodox icon is the depiction of a person's likeness and not its artistic style, which is likely a secondary issue, though, as I will explain in a moment, one which nevertheless plays a very important role. Therefore, it is a person's likeness which is the deciding factor in whether a painting constitutes an icon or a work of religious art. Every artwork depicting the likeness of a saint is that saint's icon, whereas an artwork which does not depict the unique authentic likeness of the saint is not an icon. Thus, even if such a work has been painted in the Byzantine style, it will remain unsuitable for veneration. On this basis, it can be said that the Western Church lost its icons from the moment Renaissance artists replaced the traditional likenesses of Christ and the saints with the likenesses of models from the artist's own time. The above points both determine what is essential to an icon and simultaneously indicate the role to be played by artistic style, which cannot be said to constitute the essence of an icon. It is for this reason that the artistic style in which icons were painted could and did in fact change throughout the ages, to the extent that icon painting even reached the point of naturalistic painting without leading the Church to heresy, as some would believe. In the same way, it is not heretical for an Orthodox Church to use Western polyphonic music as opposed to Byzantine music. However, in maintaining that artistic style plays a peripheral role in icon painting, I do not mean to suggest that it is not an element of the greatest importance to the icon and its function, or that individual iconographers can alter their iconographic style exclusively on the basis of their own individual criteria. Even St. Photius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, writing in 9th century, emphasized that painters should find modes of painting characterized by an appropriate solemnity, in Greek hieroprepia, in order to present the icon likenesses of the saints. Thus, the style in which icons are painted is not to be understood as an arbitrary choice on the part of icon painters. Rather, iconographic style ought to be observant and proceed on the basis of the varied needs of the body of the Church and, of course, should express the experience of the ecclesiastical body. The question that arises today is how we, as modern iconographers, should define the preconditions for the development of an artistic style informed by an ecclesiastical ethos, a style that would not be incongruous with the holy persons and events depicted in icons. Is it possible for us today to develop a kind of painting characterized by both solemnity and functionality? I will now share a few thoughts with you about the reasons for which I consider this issue to be of such a great importance, and also as to why I believe this question cannot be answered except through dialogue between the members of the Church and after much trial and error. First of all, I think it is absolutely necessary for the iconographic tradition to be preserved, at least insofar as the likenesses of the depicted saints are concerned. Iconographers all over the world should paint the likenesses of Christ and the saints in the same way, as this preserves the unity of the faith and the Church on a visible level and in a way that can be left. Here I refer mainly to those instances where, usually in the context of missionary work, certain iconographers argue that it is possible to depict Christ and the saints with different skin colors so as to match the skin color of the people being evangelized. Second, artistic style may reflect differences between peoples and places. However, any such differences should ultimately be informed neither by regional or nationalistic criteria, nor by the egotistical or personal criteria of individual artists, but should rather be informed by ecclesiastic criteria. Third, the study of the Byzantine tradition of painting can assist us in understanding the way in which the Christian Church has in the past understood the function of the icon within the space of the church building, as well as the icon's relationship with the faithful viewer. Fourth, on the basis of my own research, I have concluded that the Byzantine painting style is extraordinarily important and to a great extent unsurpassable due to the fact that its particular approach to painting results in the great liturgical functionality of Byzantine icons. It seemed that for the Byzantines, the functionality of the icon was conceived of as its ability to create a visual experiential relationship between the icon and the viewer of the icon. What Byzantine painters wished to achieve through painting was to bring the depicted persons into the present space and time of the viewer, to make them present in the sense of bringing the depicted persons into the present of liturgical time, precisely as is accomplished in the hymnology of the Church, where we likewise chant that Christ is born or is crucified today. Working within that framework, the Byzantines created a kind of installation within the physical space of the church building, wherein the depicted persons are not simply motionless likenesses fixed onto the church walls, but rather ones that move towards the viewer and come into a state of relationship with the viewer. The unity between the icon and viewer is of great importance as it expresses the unity of the body of the church itself, on a visual expressive level, enabling Orthodox ecclesiology, that is the way in which the Church understands the relationship between its members and Christ, to be perceived through the senses. Sixth, on the foundation of this aesthetic concept, the Byzantines created an entire unified system of painting, which is to say, a unified approach to painting with its own set of identifiable characteristics. This include, for example, the particular way in which objects are drawn, which involves a distinctive approach to perspective and a modeling of forms in painting, the quality of line, and of course the approach to composition in general. All of these are informed by the Byzantine conception of painting, which, as I have already mentioned, seeks to express the experience of the body of the Church. Seventh, most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, the existence of this systematic approach to painting did not preclude the ability of Byzantine painters to produce work informed by their own personal style. Quite the opposite is true. Historically, in every age, there was a continual development of artistic style, for which reason we have inherited a rich iconographic tradition, informed, however, by the same stable, continual system of painting. Geographical factors, as well as historical and social conditions, but also the personal characteristics of individual iconographers themselves, have certainly contributed to the development of particular iconographic styles. The spiritual state and education of iconographers, as well as their spiritual and artistic concerns, influenced their adoption of particular stylistic approaches. At no point, however, did the Church itself establish or identify specific artistic styles as either canonical or, for that matter, non-canonical. As a body, the only holy and apostolic Church has never officially accepted the existence of a stylistic canon for the art of iconography, but instead gave it room to develop freely throughout the ages, at least on the level of style. What the Church does seem to have endeavored to preserve was the continued existence of a particular approach to or system of painting, which I call the Byzantine system, through which the Church could express its ecclesiology, which is to say, the way the Church understands the unity of God and mankind, as well as the unity of human persons with one another in Christ. Eighth, the existence of the Byzantine system of painting provides a truly marvelous paradigm for iconographers today, and of course constitutes a point of reference by which they can judge their own personal approaches to painting. The existence of the Byzantine system of painting also demonstrates that ecclesiastical painting is not an individualistic or purely personal enterprise, but rather a matter of concern for the entire body of the Church. What is required is the existence of a well-structured language of painting as opposed to separate private artistic languages on the part of individual iconographers, no matter how impressive they may be. In other words, the well-structured language of Byzantine painting, which functions as a system, should be expressive of Orthodox ecclesiology and not simply of theological ideas or concepts. This is also the reason why theological concepts are not what is of the great importance to the life of the Church, but rather the creation of a body, the unification of persons in Christ with the Holy Eucharist and the mysteries of the Church at the center of the body of the Church. Therefore, in order for painting to truly function in the Orthodox sense, it must unify the body of the Church, contribute it to unity and not the disintegration or division. To compromise that unity, even if for the sake of expressing advanced theological concepts, is to be avoided. Ninth, this is why I say that it was out of love for mankind and in the hope of rendering painting truly functional and communicative, the Byzantine iconographers have often simplified their compositions and even painted what might, from a purely historical perspective, be considered mistakes. For example, the manner in which the Byzantines depict the Ascension of Christ and Pentecost, and have chosen to adopt some exceptionally sparse, easy to follow approaches to painting instead of more complex but less communicative ones. 10th, dialogue with a broader field of the arts should not be forbidden, because Byzantine iconographers have always been in dialogue with other traditions and have even borrowed elements from those traditions. A characteristic example would be the Byzantine dialogue between Renaissance art, which led to the development of the Cretan school. However, at the same time, iconographers today, like their predecessors, are called to work in accordance with ecclesiological criteria when selecting elements from other traditions, in order to ensure that those elements are indeed suitable for incorporation into our own iconographic tradition. In this way, the resulting icons do not run the risk of losing their functionality or becoming vehicles of private expression for individual iconographers. 11th, today, oftentimes it is an iconographer's private personal need for a spirituality that is overemphasized. In fact, sometimes this demand leads to express where the authenticity of an icon comes to be evaluated on the basis of the spiritual state of the iconographer who painted it. First of all, it needs to be said that there is no evidence of such a belief or any mention of such concerns in Byzantine sources. Such a belief is, of course, unsupported by the liturgical practice of the Church, since its Evkologia prayer books do not contain any specific prayers for iconographers. It is necessary for the role iconographers play to be clarified. Also, unbearable burdens should not be placed on the shoulders of iconographers. If only saints may paint icons, then we should all put down our brushes. No one would be worthy. It cannot be denied that it is desirable for an iconographer to be a faithful member of the Church. However, that does not mean that an iconographer's sin can in any way call into question the authenticity of an icon. If that were true, what should be expressed of priests then? An iconographer's spiritual state does play a role in the shaping of the stylistic ethos of his or her work, but so long as the established hypostatic likenesses or forms of the depicted saints are preserved, the resulting work unquestionably remains an icon. It is just that icons made by persons who do not participate in the life of the Church or live according to the way of the Church will not have the same quality in terms of style. However, so long as those icons present the authentic likenesses of the person depicted in them, they remain icons and of course are suitable for veneration. 12. Finally, I think that while on a theoretical level iconographers may be justified in creating new styles, on a practical level we should tread much more slowly and carefully, because the body of the Church is not necessarily able to follow individual iconographers' personal lines of thoughts or artistic concerns, which would bring about the danger of an art devoid of function. Such an art, while still informed by theological concepts, would not be communicative to anyone and would also be incapable of bringing healing through the unification of the body of the Church. In an age where advertising companies pay millions of dollars in order to create logos that are instantly recognizable by a person all over the planet, it would perhaps be unwise to seek to alter and destroy the forms and likenesses established in Byzantine icons, which are immediately recognizable and communicative, thus leading the viewer directly into the life of the community of the Church and to its spirituality. Therefore, instead of making any rash movements or leaps forward, I would recommend that iconographers proceed on a calm and steady path, gently moving forward together with the body of the Church. Of course, such an approach would not deny iconographers the ability to be creative in a personal way. Thank you.
Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense, and let the lifting up of my hands be an evening sacrifice. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense, and let the lifting up of my hands be an evening sacrifice. Lord, I have cried to thee, hear me. Hear the voice of my prayer, my prayer arise in thy sight as incense, and let the lifting up of my hands be an evening sacrifice. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense, and let the lifting up of my hands be an evening sacrifice.
Come, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who stand by night in the house of the Lord, in the courts of the house of our God, in the courts of the house of our God. Lift up your hands to the holy place and bless the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth, he who made heaven and earth. Come, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who stand by night in the house of the Lord, in the courts of the house of our God. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth, he who made heaven and
I have an opening question, if I may. One of the main themes I heard in your talk is that one can't speak of a canon of elements within iconographic depiction, and the reigning criterion is the hypostatic form. So neither style nor materials nor naturalistic or whatever, this is not what is the criterion. And yet one of the features of this stunning visual presentation is that there are so many things that are in common when one sees, for example, an Annunciation or Pentecost, that if they were out of place, it would be odd. If we were to see an icon of Christ Pantocrator, we would never see his neck inclined, you know, for example. So is it possible to speak of maybe not a written canon, but a kind of a de facto canon that comes out of observed practice and experience?
Yes, there are definitely, I would say, principles that we follow when we paint, because what we produce, the art, must communicate, with the people and be addressed to people's senses. But in any case, I would suggest not to define all these things as a canon, because if we define this as a canon, immediately we move towards, let's say, a dogmatic field, and that is the problem. Definitely, there are, let's say, limits, and there is a framework. That's why we use specific things that are consecrated, maybe not 100, 1,000 years for all painters. But I would say that it will be unwise to define all this, let's say, knowledge as a canon. What bothers me personally is the definition as a canon.
Would it be more proper to speak of it as a language that people can understand over the years?
I would say no. Even language is problematic for me. I would say that it's a way of thinking. That is better, I think. It is a way of thinking. All iconographers, it would be good to have a way of thinking, to have an ecclesiological way of thinking, ecclesiastic way of thinking. So we have to think as an ecclesia. So we have to paint things, paint whatever is depicted, and bring whatever is depicted towards the congregation, because we want to visualize the body of Christ in the Eucharistic synaxis. So this is a way of thinking. We can do that in many different ways. We are following now this specific, what we call today the Byzantine tradition, or later Russian tradition. It's the same artistic language. Actually, it's coming from the Greek-Roman world. It's not even Byzantine. It's nothing. Okay, it's a very ancient tradition. We use this and we follow this, but theoretically, we could have a completely different approach and render the same concept in completely different visual terms. We could do that. For example, I suppose that Christians in Far East, in Asia, could use their own artistic language to do this. And that will be, I would say that would be very, very good to do. Or in Africa, they have a great artistic tradition, and they don't use this tradition to render their icons. I don't mean to paint Christ as a black person, because he was Jew. He was not black. So there is no reason to do something like that, because that's a historical mistake. We don't have to do that. But we can use a different, an African, let's say, artistic language to render this historical form. Exactly what we do with the gospel. We don't change the history. We don't say that Christ was born in Nairobi. We say that Christ was born in Bethlehem. But we say that in Arab, in other languages, many different languages. So this is what we could do.
Thank you, Dr. Kordis, and thank you for spending your Lent with us. It's been a very enriching experience having you here on campus. My question is related to the ecclesiastical space in which an icon inhabits, particularly as the bread and butter of most iconographers is the commission, and most commissions come from private individuals rather than church buildings. Is there any other unique considerations you make personally when you are writing an icon for the individual that will be used in a domestic sanctuary compared to a church building that is communal? Thank you.
Oh, that's very, very good and very interesting question. Normally, we don't use let's say we don't change the artistic language if we have a commission for domestic use of an icon, because there is no such thing. Actually, there is no distinction between an ecclesiastical use of an icon or a domestic use of an icon. It's always the same. The function of the icon is always the same. But I would say that we could do some changes. For example, if you have a commission for an icon for a child, I would suggest to paint the icon, let's say, in brighter colors. You could do that without changing anything basic. You could follow precisely, the specific principles and rules of painting, but you could do some, slight changes in order for the icon to have a better function for a child. You could do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I had a follow-up question. Mm-hmm. I hope you don't mind. Would icons be able to adapt to, well, I think I already know your answer, but I want to hear it from you. Be able to adapt to circumstances, say, for example, tragedy, war, all kinds of human contexts that we encounter ourselves and the community encounters themselves in?
Well, that's a big question. It depends. Even if we do not want to adapt the icons in specific circumstances, that happens. For example, if you live in a country where a war or something like that is happening, even if you don't want, your state, your feelings will affect the icon, even if you don't want to do that. But it's a different question if we could change, let's say, the theme of the icon in order for it to be adapted to specific circumstances. That's another thing, and could be a beautiful thing for a discussion, but we have to have a very specific, example. Otherwise, I cannot give any answer.
Can I give you one? Let's say the Annunciation or the flight to Egypt has something to do with the refugee crisis and a refugee crisis.
These are two different things. I would say that we could, the Annunciation must be as it is. We cannot change the icon itself, but we could have, let's say, a peripheral iconography where we can connect this event of the New Testament era with what's happening today. But that would be in the periphery, not inside the icon. We do have such things actually. We have connection between Old Testament and New Testament events. We have sometimes we have a connection between Christological themes with contemporary world. There are such attempts, yes, and we can do, but we have to be, I would say, very careful, not touching the main theme. For example, I would suggest to paint let's say, the icon of a crucifixion in New York. You cannot do that, because that was a specific historical event that happened then, there. You cannot just change, the historical, parameters. That would be affect the history, and we don't want to do that.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I have a question from some of our online viewers. Pedro Sarsama asks, you articulated, thank you, Dr. Kordis, you articulated a nice vision of creativity and tradition and how the two may come together, including providing examples. It is important to have examples of success, but it might be instructive to understand what constitutes failure in this regard. Do you have any comments?
That's a very difficult thing to do, you know. I have presented, you know, different attempts that, you know, from the beginning of 20th century, you know, until now. That's a big question, you know, to evaluate all these attempts. It's not an easy thing. It's a very different discussion, and I think that I cannot do this now. You know, it's a very complicated issue because we have to define precisely the criteria for all things. For example, what is the criterion for the composition, the way we compose, or what is the criterion for the, you know, the use of color, and then the relationships between lines, the quality of lines. All these are very, 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 very specific themes, and it's not easy to do that now.
Thank you so much for speaking here tonight. I guess I have two questions. The second is more of a follow-up question. So the first is when you spoke about the criteria for an icon, you spoke about not so much the type of materials used, but whether or not it depicts the likeness of the saint, and it enables unity between the viewer and communion in the church. So obviously in our more modern times, we have photographic likenesses of more modern saints. So you mentioned we inherited painting as an art form to use in iconography. So is there something specific in painting itself, since not in the materials, that would enable it for veneration versus like a photograph?
Can you clarify a bit more?
I mean, we've got photographs of more modern saints, St. John of St. Francisco, some of the Greek elders. Why would those be inappropriate for use in the church? Is it only, since it's not the type of paint or the wood specifically that makes an icon, is it painting itself?
Yeah. A photograph, I would say that is a raw material. The photograph, it is the icon of a person, but doesn't have the function we want in the church. There is I'll give you a very specific example. We do have photographs of St. Nectarius of Aegina. In one of these photos, St. Nectarius is looking towards, as far as I remember, to the right. And some iconographers, using this photograph, they produced an icon of St. Nectarius. And St. Nectarius is depicted exactly like that, just looking towards a different direction. The icon is painted in Byzantine, purely Byzantine style, has gold and, all what is described as to be the proper, materials and style and everything. The form of St. Nectarius, the face is also recognizable, but still this icon doesn't have the function we want, because in this icon, St. Nectarius is absent, is not here for us. That's why in, let's say, the consecrated way of depicting a saint, we depict the person in a very specific way. So we have two different movements. One is the movement of the head, and the other is the movement of the eyes. So this way, these are opposed movements. If we paint a person like that, wherever you stand in front of this icon, he is looking at you. You are in connection with this person. This way, this person, this depicted person, it is present. He is present. And so he is here, and we could say that this is an ecclesiastical icon. So this is exactly what we want. It's not the materials, it's not the style, it's nothing. The first thing we want is to have the likeness of the saint and his presence, because this is the most important thing. So, to go back, photograph is a raw material, but it's not yet an icon. We have to remove things from a photograph and add things to become an icon. It's like what happened with the Gospels. You know, the apostles, they had many information, but they did not write all this information. They just took few things in order for a very functional book to be written. We do exactly the same thing. We remove elements from, you know, the face of the holy person, and we add other things in order for a functional form of art to be created.
Okay, thank you. That kind of leads into my follow-up question a little bit. Personally, I was pretty surprised to see some iconographers in the slideshow that were influenced by more modern art movements such as Cubism and those, which personally I don't find very aesthetically pleasing. So I was wondering if there was a style of art that could be too distracting to the viewer, which might impede veneration, or maybe more specifically, is there a line at which a lack of beauty present in a given style might make it impossible to use for iconography?
I would agree. I didn't. My presentation, that's not an evaluation. I didn't say that whatever is presented, I agree with this. I have just presented different attempts. I would agree that not all elements from contemporary or modern, movements are suitable for, adoption in iconographic tradition. Not everything. That's why I believe that we have to have very well-shaped criteria to know what exactly we can take or not, because not everything is appropriate, to create an icon, and that demands a lot of study and discussion and many other things.
So
For example, I would say that the problem is not only with elements that are coming from a contemporary secular painting, but I would say that we could go back. I have a question about the use of gold in icons today. I'm not sure that gold today is an appropriate element to be used for icons, because maybe it's consecrated, but I'm not sure that people today see in gold same thing as in the past. So we have to reconsider maybe many things, not only from secular, that invade iconography from secular painting, but also to see things from the past. There is, in our iconography, there are many elements coming from the typicon of Byzantine court. Today, all these elements must be, I would say, reconsidered.
thank you.
Welcome.
Another question from online. Is it appropriate to draw stylistic elements from other cultures which have not received Christ? For example, taking auras from Buddhist iconography, etc., and then applying them through an Orthodox lens?
That's a very difficult question to be answered. I'm not sure that I can say I could be positive. It's a very sensitive issue. It's a really sensitive issue. Once we were painting in a church in Lebanon, and we were using a beautiful orange color in a decorative motif, and the priest and a few other parishioners came and told us that no, you cannot use this orange. I told them, why not? And there was a very specific reason why we should avoid that. We didn't know that. So it's a very sensitive issue, you know, to get the orange from Buddhist tradition and to apply in a Christian tradition. I don't know if you can do. Maybe some people will scandalize, and or the opposite could be very happy to see something like that. I'm not sure. I think that I cannot respond, you know, to a question like that. It's very complicated and very sensitive issue. Yeah.
A slightly related question. We were talking last night about cultures, for example, in the Far East and, for example, in Korea, where it's, you know, you were saying earlier that it's important to have the icon, you know, looking at you through the rhythm of light and direction. And in some cultures, to be looking at someone directly is too intense, or it's almost offensive.
Yes, exactly.
So what are the kinds of ways in which to translate what you say we must be conveying in an icon, not only aesthetically but culturally?
It's very complicated. Yes, well, a friend iconographer, he was working in Korea, and he told me that he had this specific problem, because for us, for let's say European, you know, cultural people, it's quite natural, you know, for if we want to have a contact to look at this person, which is it's beautiful, it's very polite, it's very good, very nice, but not for the culture in Korea. That's a very inappropriate thing. It's very impolite. So the iconographer must know very well, you know, the codes of the society and how people feel, and adapt things to, you know, the specific cultural environment. I think that's very, very important. And this way, iconography could be functional. Otherwise, it's not functional. And it's the opposite. Could be the opposite. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Kordis, for your presentation. I was wondering your thoughts on the role of the laity or the body of Christ in determining what constitutes an icon. You know, I saw many icons up here, like other people, or images, which some of them looked very sort of clearly within the iconographic tradition, and others were more kind of in between what I would say an icon and modern art, and then some which would, you know, I would say if I saw it in a gallery, I would be very pleasantly surprised, but if I saw it in a church, I might think twice about venerating it. And so do you think that the sort of conciliarity of the body of Christ is important for determining what constitutes an icon?
I think that things are pretty clear. The icon is an icon because carries the likeness of the person depicted, of the saint depicted. Okay, that's the definition of the icon. But about the artistic, you know, element of the icon, I would say that you know, the members of any parish should have, let's say, should be part of the creation of the icons. And that would be the proper process, I think, for creating iconography for a parish. The selected iconographers should expose their work and show their proposal to, you know, parishioners, and people could decide what they want to have in their church, because they will live in this church, they and their children, etc. So could be organic part of the artistic process, you know, the body of a church locally in a parish could be. I don't know how things work, you know, everywhere, even in the States. In Greece, unfortunately, this doesn't happen. Things are not like that. You know, the priest, bishop, sometimes just decides who will be the iconographer who will paint the church, and that's it. In some churches in the States I have painted, the lay people had a very, decisive, opinion, and they were participating. I would say that would be very nice to have this collaboration and work all together, because it is something that is for all.
We do have time for one or two really brief further questions from the room.
Thank you for your presentation. You talked a lot about painting icons, and at least the reality for me is that most of the icons I own are printed. Maybe they were once painted, but they have been printed and probably mass produced for the laity. As an iconographer or theologically, do you see any issue with that, or do you think that's an acceptable thing? At least the reality.
You mean to print icons?
Printed? Yeah, to take hand-painted icons and print them out and mass produce them for the laity.
Well, I would say that the same question is about the gospel book. It's exactly the same. Is it right to print, the gospel books? No.
Hand-painted icons.
It is. We do that. It's good to do that. Same thing. It's good to print icons, and there is no problem even to destroy the printed icons. There was a dispute in Byzantium in 12th century, in Comnenian period, and this issue exactly was the main problem, because they wanted to destroy silver and golden items where the image of Christ was printed. They wanted to destroy, because they wanted just the gold for money, and there was a big dispute, theological, and the decision of a local synod in Constantinople was that yes, we can destroy icons. There is no problem, because the icon is not the hypostasis; it's just the likeness of the hypostasis. So we can do that, unless we destroy the icon to let's say to offend the person depicted. In that case, it's a different thing. I think it's good to print icons, because we have to work with icons in our contemporary world. And the good thing is that I think that would be good to, let's say, to destroy these printed icons in a proper way, in a proper manner. As in the past, at least for the ecumenical patriarchate, the icons, the damaged icons, were burned for producing the mirror. Specific day, I don't exactly remember, the details, but they were burned, destroyed, damaged icons for producing the holy mirror. Yeah. The icons, the damaged icons, were burned.
Thank you first for the presentation. Let me start with, I'm neither a theologian nor artist, so please be patient with me. But I was particularly receptive to what you were saying about the impossibility to define or reduce the truth that the beauty nourishes us with. And then I was thinking about the language of philosophy, and how in contemporary philosophy, phenomenology, and hermeneutics, there is this phrase of surplus of meaning, or superabundance of meaning. And I was thinking, as you were mentioning, there is a context for authentic icons, the church. So even if, not even if, while we have this context from which we cannot, or outside of which we cannot live, still the truth comes superabundantly. And there is always a surplus of truth. So we never exhaust our, we never exhaust the truth of what God is, or what life in Christ is, or life in the church is. And it seems to me that you're on, and that's the question. Please give me a corrective feedback if I'm wrong, that what you were saying is that not only there is only one hand tradition, and on the other hand creativity, but tradition as a living source, as a revitalizing, source is creativity. And we cannot divorce, and perhaps that would be one way in which ugliness or inflexibility or exhaustive, thinking or pseudo-theologies arise, when we think that in the church we are done knowing. And beauty is just these things, and we no longer vibrate because we are done vibrating. And so, please let me know if I understood correctly that tradition is a living reality with a prototype, with a hypostasis Christ. The context is ecclesiastic, is the church. And beauty makes us remember that it's inexhaustible, hence the need for creativity. And I will take the feedback and process it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, but something like that. Tradition, basically, it is as I told you before, it's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking. Actually, it is a spirit. It's the Holy Spirit. If you believe in the church, and you have the spirit of the church, the Holy Spirit, you think in a specific way, and then whatever you create, you are on, let's say, on tradition. Otherwise, if you produce things in a very individualistic way, you do not create, or you don't continue tradition. To continue tradition means you have to think same way as the people before you. Even if you don't use same forms or same language, the way of thinking must be the same. Only at this moment, creativity and tradition go together. Otherwise, can be separated.
George, Dr. Kordis, thank you so much for everything you've given us. Let's recognize Professor Kordis. I just want to thank the technical team. It's very, very hard to do what they've been doing tonight. And Alexandru, Sarah, Deacon Alexander, thank you. And thanks to everyone who's here in person. Thanks to everyone who is online and contributed questions. And thanks to the people who help us in our work here at the seminary, and then tonight specifically for the Institute of Sacred Arts, people who have supported us financially and with prayer and with contributions of all different kinds. And so we want to keep hearing from you and keep being engaged with you. So please be in touch with us as well. Thank you all.